Good evening, everybody. We belong to God, and to Him we shall return. We are extremely saddened to hear of the passing of His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Deputy Ruler of Dubai and UAE Minister of Finance. We offer our sincere condolences to the leadership of UAE and to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister and Ruler of Dubai. Good evening, everybody. Good evening again. Welcome to another session here at TiE Dubai. Radical journeys are the most exciting and the best to hear. And I can't wait to hear today's story. From being a commodities and derivatives expert from scaling two regional businesses to a whole new level, from being CEO in both the occasions to founding his aesthetics company, is a pretty radical move in my opinion. On that note again, on behalf of TiE Dubai, welcome, welcome, welcome. May each of you learn exciting pivots and new ways to think while on your journey. Today, cutting the introduction short because I'm sure many of you know about TiE. TiE, if there is one person that does not know, please share that in chat and I can get more details to you. In a nutshell, TiE is an organization that fosters entrepreneurship globally. What started as a small gathering in Silicon Valley in 1992 has turned into more than 60 chapters in 15 countries. So TiE functions on 5 main pillars, namely mentoring, networking, education, funding, and incubation. While TiE has a global reach, we make sure each chapter gets to focus on the local ecosystem. There are some great programs we run for all the entrepreneurs. There's a mentorship program, TiE Women program, university program, TiE Hustle, TiE Wellness, there's a TiE Legal series. And the most amazing part of this organization is that it is run on the generosity and passion of many, many successful entrepreneurs who are leaders in their own right. Thank you to all the charter members in the audience. You know who you are. TiE Dubai is the Middle East chapter of TiE based in the Dubai Internet City and has been around for more than 18 years now. The easiest way to be a part of this community and to get to know all about our events and programs is by liking TiE Dubai on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everywhere we are TiE Dubai, so we can find us there. I would also like to acknowledge and thank all of TiE Dubai's sponsors and partners who continually support us in bringing more to you. Moving on to our session for today, I'm more than pleased to introduce our moderator for today, a man who wears several hats, literally. He comes with over 20 years of experience and a proven track record in leading roles at global corporates. Ziad Mathar is a wireless native leader in emerging technologies and entrepreneurship, and a firm believer that the right talent powers innovative businesses. As the founding partner of Meditari, a digital advisory network, Ziad's expertise helps bridge between global innovation and local opportunities. He's a co-founder at Coconut, the leading social recruitment community for the hospitality world. He sits on several boards, including TiE, where he just stepped down as president this year. Known for his strategic mindset, extensive regional network, and driven personality, he remains at the forefront of change as a sought-after thought leader and true global citizen. When he's not out advancing the digital world through innovative solutions, Ziad is a casual photographer, an accidental athlete, and most importantly, unanimously appointed as Chief Barbecue Officer, the ultimate all-rounder. Without further ado, Ziad, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Cecily, for the kind introduction. And before we start, I join you in expressing sincere condolences to the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, the ruling family in Dubai, and the citizens of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome again to this TiE Dubai event. I hope you're having a great week. Today is, somehow of a milestone, perhaps less a celebratory one, but it's been a year almost this month where we have shifted our events to the virtual platform. During this period, we have hosted various entrepreneurs, thought leaders, industry experts, as well as many online pitching sessions where entrepreneurs showed us and talked about their ideas. We did the TiE mentorship program pitches, the TiE Young Entrepreneur pitches, TiE Women Regional Finals, as well as the TiE Women Global Finals, which took place in Dubai back in January, and which we are actually kicking off again next week globally. We thank you all for being part of this exciting journey. All right. While entrepreneurship is sometimes associated with the digital world of startups, at TiE, we have a broader definition. We consider that this is not necessarily the exclusive domain of tech and online. We have a strong belief that great world-changing concepts can come from various sectors and at different levels of maturity. And joining me today is actually a makeup artist. So now that I got your attention, without much further ado, I would like to welcome Malcolm Wall-Morris, founder and CEO of EMA Aesthetics. Please give Malcolm a virtual round of applause. Malcolm.
Thank you.
Makeup artist, generalist, entrepreneur. We're going to talk about each one of these titles. But let's start by talking a little bit more about yourself, your background, what brings you here today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and the warm welcome. I particularly like the makeup artist title, very interesting. I was asked by a member of TiE if I would be interested in participating in one of the webinars. And my first reaction was, I'm not an entrepreneur. Why would you want me to be on the webinar? And the individual explained to me, well, actually, I think you are an entrepreneur. And he listed off a number of reasons. And so I said, well, I'm more than happy to be part of this. I am, despite this very strong English accent, I'm an Irishman. I was born in Dublin 49 years ago, and have been very fortunate to live in Europe as well as the Middle East. And I've called Dubai my home for the past 14 years. And I've worked in a variety of industries, whether it be physical trade, financial services, free zones, manufacturing, distribution, and then most recently, the last 3 years in the world of medical aesthetics, which I guess is where the makeup artist came from. My career has been very varied, opportunistic, some would say, but I've always taken each role I've taken or each opportunity I've taken, I've always seen value, seen something, an opportunity for personal growth, an opportunity for success, of course. But I suppose ultimately it's the challenge is that I feel I can make a meaningful difference and I can do something that's different. And I've been very fortunate that in pretty much every role I've done, I've been able to leave my mark, and which has been fantastic. So that's really what brings me here today. And I'm excited to hear the questions that I may be asked by yourself, Ziad, and the audience who are there.
Very good. Thank you, Malcolm. And thanks again for being with us today. And tip of the hat to the member who introduced you to us. It's Rohit, our director of events in TiE. So he's the man behind most of our events, although he doesn't always show on screen. I like to start with talking about what I call the elephant in the Zoom. And in this case, it's clear for me that you come from a long corporate history where you were in various jobs, but at each time it feels as if the moment you find a comfortable position, you jump into a very uncomfortable position. So first time we saw you jump into the role at DMCC, which is a huge organization, but at the height of the beginning of the financial crisis. And then as you went along with that role, and I guess turned it around, fixed things, and everybody is happy and things are getting rosy, you decide to jump again into something completely new, which is the world of aesthetics and makeup, as we call it. So, what drives you to leave your comfort zone every time?
I wish I could say it was anything other than boredom. One of my very first roles that was meaningful or something that gave me material change was being a physical coffee trader, which is very challenging. You had to be a buyer, you had to be able to negotiate with growers directly and buy products. You had to be able to negotiate and sell to large multinational companies like Nestle and Procter & Gamble. You had to be able to use futures markets to hedge risk. You had to be able to use foreign exchange desks to hedge risk in terms of foreign exchange. So it was a very, very complex role. And what I realized is once I'd mastered it would probably be an exaggeration, but once I was comfortable with it, it began to seem very routine. And every year was going to be the same. It was waiting for the season to start. Is there going to be more or less product available, new trends, etc.? And that's where I began to feel a little bit sort of fatigued, or I'm not learning anything anymore. And so that's probably where I tend to jump. That hasn't always been the case. There's a case sometimes of opportunity. So when I moved to Dubai back in 2007 from the UK, I was headhunted to run the Dubai Gold and Commodity Exchange. That was the opportunity to leave a very well-known market leader in the space in London called Life and come to the UAE to help the UAE as a whole and Dubai government create a capital market here. So that was a slightly different challenge. Leaving that to join the DMCC, well, the DMCC was the parent company of the exchange. And when my executive chairman asked me whether I would consider that, yes, it was a huge opportunity, very exciting. So it wasn't quite the same as being bought. I hadn't finished the work at DGCX, but I felt that I could achieve much more at the DMCC. So it's a combination of boredom. It's a combination of understanding opportunity and value and personal learning.
And what we see is that you're not sticking necessarily to a very particular set of specialized skills, and you're more of a generalist in this case, because, you know, from coffee trading, which could be very special, to more general exchange, to then the more, I would say, regulatory or real estate related business, and now into the aesthetics world. How do you balance between being a generalist, as I introduced you, and the need somehow to understand the topic and be very deep into the knowledge of what you're dealing with?
That's a good question. And this is probably the answer I'll give may raise some eyebrows amongst the audience, is that I'm one of those individuals who believe that the business is business. And that the fundamentals of business are the same across multi-sectors. And the number of times I've heard in my career that, oh, but our industry is different. And the reasons it's different are outlined. And invariably the same. Yes, of course, there are local market dynamics. Yeah, there are specific industry dynamics, but it's usually about revenue. It's usually about customers. It's usually about delivering a product and service with various other variables that come into that. And so the theme of generalist, for me, once you've managed to contain or obtain the level of information you need to make sound decisions, then I don't find it very challenging. And if I go back to many, many years ago, when I had what I would say probably one of my mentors was my direct manager when I was working at the life market, his mantra was to always surround himself by brilliant people and empower them to be brilliant. And so now I'm working in the world of medical aesthetics. I surround myself with people who understand the industry, the products, the technologies. That's their role. My role is to empower them to be brilliant and bring maybe something else from other markets into that. So every time I've looked at the industry, whenever I've made a shift in following the same profile.
And you think this is replicable also for our audience, for the members that are listening here in their business? How do they apply this in other sectors, in other industries, and also at different stages of growth of their companies? Can you start that way, or is this something you adopt somehow in the middle?
I think the way to answer that question would be why it took me 48 years to create my own company. And I look around, you know, today at all the entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech space, and doing incredibly amazing things, disruptive things in the industry. I didn't feel ready to start my own business until 3 years ago. And during the last 3 years, the journey I've been on, I've had to draw on every single last ounce of experience that I've taken from when I started my career age 19. And I wasn't ready. So absolutely, it's possible to jump into a new industry with no experience, surround yourself with brilliant people. But I am drawing on a vast library, a wealth of knowledge that I've understood how financial markets work, how free zones work, how government works, stakeholders, how to operate with a board, how to operate with investors, technology, project plans, all these things I've managed to draw on. So I'm a generalist, but I'm a generalist with a huge wealth of knowledge that come from my career. You know, so going back, as I said, I don't know how some entrepreneurs start. They have a great idea, but there's so much more to success than just a good idea. And I think if we were rewarded for good ideas, we'd all be retired, or we'd all be enjoying the fruits of our ideas. But there's a real difference between an idea and execution. And even when execution is amazing and perfect as per plan. We all know it's not what you know that causes the problems, it's what you don't know. And so I think maybe that's that generalist mentality is the acceptance of what you don't know and the adaptability to manage and deal with that potentially more promptly. I think the expression is used as pivoting is probably a good word. And but a generalist, because they're used to looking at things in a different way, in an industry that they don't take for granted, or industries that don't take for granted, maybe that way you're more open to change and more open to delivering execution results.
Well, music to my ears. I still believe that us in the 40s can start from scratch, and we'll get to that. Question is, as you said, ideas, are abundant, and I'm sure you had multiple ideas during that 25-year corporate journey that you had, but you only decided to move 3-4 years ago for this particular idea. What was different in this case?
I was at a reflection point myself. I mean, I was very lucky that I had enjoyed, great corporate success. I'd risen, if you want to call it, to the top of the slippery pole, the end of the slippery pole. When you've been CEO of some large organizations, you can't go much higher. Yes, of course, you can become a board member, but you are running an organization. And particularly when you've delivered multiple success stories in that role, what's next? And yes, a financial equation comes into it. It's the attainment you get from delivery, the attainment you get from showing that a business concept or a change of business position, business model has worked. But actually now it'd be quite nice to do it for yourself. So that was it. And I think that, maybe mid to late 40s is when you become more aware of that. Maybe the children are a little bit older. Maybe you're thinking that your time is running out. Certainly up until my mid 40s, I never thought about my age. I never thought about time. I was always the youngest CEO, the youngest person in my class, the first to have done things, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe mid 40s, maybe start thinking, oh, there's a clock ticking. And maybe it's about time, if you really want to have that self-fulfillment, you should do your own thing. Maybe that was it. I haven't really looked at it too hard, if I'm honest with you, because I've been too busy trying to deliver the success for my business. Maybe once we've enjoyed a very good exit a few years from now, and we do another one of these calls, the conversation will be the successful entrepreneur. We could reflect on that point. We'll see.
I'll pencil it in our diaries. And
I would welcome it.
and to go back a little bit to then the start of this new phase of the journey, having been the youngest CEO and the brightest, and probably surrounded by a lot of people and support functions, then you have to start from scratch. In an industry where you are fresh, a company that doesn't exist. How did you deal with that shock to your own system?
That's very, very pertinent. When you run a very large organization, you are surrounded by support networks. You have full-time PAs, you have office managers, you have heads of departments, and your role is to make decisions. Your role is to delegate, make decisions, and it's very heavy. It's not heavy lifting in terms of physical work, but it's heavy lifting in terms of mental work. When you start your own business, all of a sudden you have to learn how to write a PowerPoint slide. God love PowerPoint, but you have to learn how to write a PowerPoint slide. You have to do everything yourself. If your IT is not working, you have to think about your marketing messages and all that stuff. Again, that's something that you do with pleasure because it's yours. It's your own thing that you're doing. Of course, I yearn for the days when the business is successful enough that I can go back to the point where someone else can do the heavy lifting on the manual side of things. And if an email is not going through, it's not me to have to ring GoDaddy in the early days to find out why the server's not connecting, and that someone else is there to do it for you, because then your time is only spent effectively making material changes to the business. You have no choice. You have to roll up your sleeves and you have to get on with it, because if you don't do it, no one else will. And so you learn to become ruthlessly efficient with your time, ruthlessly efficient. I mean, there's the one thing I mentioned, clocks ticking earlier, that being an entrepreneur has taught me, is that every minute counts, and every moment you spend on a decision or something that stops you making a decision, whether it be an IT problem or something else, it just detracts from what you're trying to achieve.
And having said all of this now, do you still insist, on that discussion you had with Rohit, that you're not an entrepreneur?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I think from the conversation with Rohit, he opened my eyes. I mean, I've known Rohit for a number of years, and we were together in YPO. He opened my eyes that being an entrepreneur wasn't just about having your own business and being entrepreneurial. Actually, you can be an entrepreneur in the corporate world. You can look at things differently. And he spoke to me at length about how he felt, because he's known me, as I said, for a number of years, how I had been very entrepreneurial in the exchange world, how I'd been very, very entrepreneurial, in particular at DMCC. And that's why I said, okay, well, then I think then maybe I could bring a little bit of interest and value to those participating in the TiE Dubai talks. If I could expand on that, when I joined the DMCC, the free zone world, which is very much a real estate business, at the peak of the start of the Dubai world debt crisis in Dubai, at the center of the financial crisis, we just looked at the business differently. We said, this is no longer a real estate business. We have to do something different. That with hindsight was incredibly entrepreneurial. And in fact, there have been case studies written about what we did to the business, which is used for MBA teaching classes. For me, it was just common sense. It wasn't being entrepreneurial. It was about, well, this isn't working. We have to try something different. Others look at it as being entrepreneurial. You pulled a rabbit out of a hat. You did something revolutionary. What academic model did you use to get there? And I have to be honest, having never been to university, never been to college, I don't know much about academic models. I just do what feels right, and I think that's right.
Follow the gut feeling. And in balancing this right now and the time it takes, as you said, the time being that very limited and crucial resource, yet you still managed to take some time to be with us today also, and to participate in other organizations like the YPO and others. How do you split your time? How do you balance these things?
Well, I don't believe in this, what I call this, something called a misnomer of work-life balance. I just don't believe that exists. There's life. And in your life, you decide to dedicate time to various things that you're doing, whether it be your job, whether it be your spouse, whether it be your children, whether it be sleeping, whether it be seeing friends. You decide how you spend your time. And so it's not about saying, I only work 9 till 5, or I only work 6 till 6, or whatever it is. You find the time. And I said, because I knew Rohit, and he said, I really think that TiE is something that you would get value from participating in. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I said, of course, let me try. I've had huge value out of YPO over the last 11 years since I've been a member. And so you don't try unless maybe that's entrepreneurial. You don't know unless you try, right? So.
Absolutely. Thanks again for being with us, Ben. And let's move to the next part of what I call the business unusual section, because it's not business as usual. It's never been, and everything is being disrupted nowadays. And you being a generalist decided to get into this new industry. Why do you particularly select cosmetics or aesthetics world to get into? What is the key that you found there?
I feel like I should put my pitch deck up on the screen just to go through you in huge detail and elicit huge amounts of investment. It was very simple. I am in my late 40s. I've been involved in multiple industries, and increasingly the world's looking very different. The way the digital and technology in particular is moving apace, social media, all these different industries of which I know very little and don't really participate in, have to participate in these days, but don't know much about. What I discovered when I looked at the world of medical aesthetics. Now, for those in the audience who don't know what medical aesthetics are, it is non-surgical aesthetics. So it's non-cutting. So we're looking at anything from a Botox injection, a filler injection, laser treatments, facial treatments, all these treatments which don't involve invasive procedures such as surgery. So that's that world. And to be fair, when I was first approached to look at it, to understand it, I was very dismissive. And I said, this is effectively not a real industry. This is people selling snake oil to middle-aged ladies who've got fine lines around their eyes. But when I began to look at it closely, I found an $11.5 billion industry growing at an average CAGR of 10%, with gross margins on devices and products in excess of 60% at every level of the supply chain. So manufacturer to distributor, distributor to clinic, doctor, esthetician, and then from them to a client, myself, my wife, whoever's out there. So large industry, high growth, high margin, mass fragmentation. So there's thousands of companies in the industry. Consolidation's beginning to happen. And then combined with that, a real lack of innovation in how the product's delivered. Great innovation in terms of technologies used, the next laser device, the next facial device, the next injectable that's being developed, great, but no innovation how the product's delivered. As well as that, I came across a huge complacency in the industry that it was going to be like this forever. It was always going to grow at 10% CAGR. It was always going to enjoy significant margin. It was always going to be fragmented, and it was very commoditized. It was all about moving boxes and shifting boxes, and very little about sort of patient care and that sort of idea. So for me, that was all of the recipe that I found very, very interesting, which was if I could bring the knowledge I'd acquired in other industries, where if you can make a profitable business out of a gross margin of 5 or 6%, imagine what you could do with 60% gross margin at just one element of the supply chain. And knowing that it's a relatively new industry, about 20 years old, there was going to be consolidation coming. There was a chance of bringing innovation in product delivery. And therefore I thought, gosh, there's me in my mid-40s with all this knowledge, which is still applicable. It's still applicable without being a new industry at that per se. So as a traditional product and services industry, which I thought that my experience could do something interesting with. So that was a very long answer to a short question.
Yeah, but it's interesting because fragmentation and commoditization in the industry are usually alarm signs that we shouldn't go in there from a lot of other aspects, because, oh, no, this market is too fragmented, I cannot address it, or the product or service is too commodified, so I cannot differentiate. But yet you decided to jump into it. So tell us specifically in the case of EMA Aesthetics, what makes it better than the others at dealing with these two elements of fragmentation and commoditization? And then let's talk about the innovation and the disruption that you brought.
Okay, so let me just give the audience a bit of an idea of what we're talking about in terms of the fragmentation. So in the last 2 years, there have been two transactions, one in 2019 and one in 2020, which are the beginnings of the consolidation of the industry. In 2019, Procter & Gamble, Colgate, so the people we know well for our oral hygiene, decided to enter the aesthetic space. They were going to diversify not out of, but away from dental, and they wanted to move into skincare. Skincare was their idea. And they purchased a French brand called Filorga, which was doing about 120 million euros of top-line revenue. And Filorga had turned down an acquisition attempt by L'Oreal in 2018 for 250 million euros, 8 to 10 times EBITDA, a very fair standard industry multiple, but they turned it down. Procter & Gamble, Colgate, paid 1.69 billion euros for the business. So 16 times top line, right? That's just one example. So what are Colgate seeing in this industry, which they're willing to pay that level of multiple? And then very, very recently, at the end of last year, the market leader in facial devices, a brand called HydraFacial, through a SPAC mechanism with the former CEO of Allergan, achieved a 6.5 to 7 times multiple again of revenue with the SPAC vehicle. So what you're seeing again is this consolidation. So I just want to flavor. So when we talk about commoditization or fragmentation, there is clearly value to be derived in the industry. So my approach was, when I looked at this, and actually I got this very much from financial services in the exchange world. And I'll explain why. Is that an exchange provides a marketplace, a place for buyers and sellers to come and exchange, whether it be commodities or a note for commodities at an agreed price, buy and sell price. But as an exchange, your customer is the broker. There's a broker who is a member of the exchange who provides access to the eventual customer, who could be a commodity trader, could be a coffee roaster, could be a retail investor, whatever it is. So as an exchange, you have an imperfect supply chain to the individual or company using your product, and you're going to the broker. And therefore, you learn how to communicate directly with that end user to make sure that they understand how to use the products and how you can achieve more traded volume. This industry, the world of medical aesthetics, is exactly the same. We create products, we deliver them to a doctor, an esthetician, a clinic, and they then deliver a treatment, they're a gatekeeper, to a patient. And I said, well, if I've understood how to deal with it in the financial services, an end user, a final user of the exchange, surely this way I can use the same technique to communicate with a patient, with the gatekeeper being a doctor. So that was the first thing, and the strategizing about how to do that. And then realizing the commoditization of the industry about moving boxes. And I hope there are no doctors on the webinar today, but doctors we trust with our health if we need them to see their health reasons. But doctors are their businesses; they're there to make money, right? And they will choose the procedures that, yes, give good patient care, but also which they generate the most revenue return of their time. And the industry has become, in my opinion, about moving boxes. It's about how much product I can move, how quickly I can move product, what's the most efficient use of clinic space, how many injections can I do, and if I make more money from injection than I do from another procedure, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, how can we help the practitioner be protected, so their ROs are protected? Do we ensure they're able to give the best levels of patient care and, of course, achieve the return on investment of their time that's possible? And that's the business model that we built up, and again, how I decided to go to market in the world of medical aesthetics.
Amazing. And I think it's quite applicable to other sectors. So what, in your opinion, are other sectors that could be ripe for this? Maybe we give some ideas to some of our listeners today.
Other sectors. I mean, as I said, the way that I've always looked at the sectors that I've worked in is I hear them. I have the gut reaction of, does that sound interesting to me? Medical aesthetics didn't, but I still began to look at it. So there was obviously some gut reaction there. And then I began to explore, and I asked various questions. What is the business model? What are the participants say at every level about how the business operates? What am I seeing as the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats? And I think that you could apply that to every industry. I don't have a list of next projects that I'm going to run that I can reel off to you now. But if you follow that same recipe and you say, well, I know where my value is, my strength is, or my business strength is, and I'm looking at the new market segment, the question really is, what ill are you trying to fix? And if you're trying to fix an ill, that's great. This is the timing question. But does the industry want the ill to be fixed? Right? So here we could use the expression disruption. Everyone talks about disruption today and how Uber disrupted, the taxi market or paid transport market, how food delivery services, how Facebook, all these disruptors. But that's because the market was ready for disruption. There was a real need for people to be able to hail a car or a taxi when they wanted it, as they wanted, in an efficient manner, et cetera, et cetera. So they wanted that disruption. The taxi companies didn't want the disruption. Individuals who owned assets and cars wanted disruption, and those wanted the ride wanted disruption. So in my industry, people don't want disruption today. They don't want it because it's working just fine. So it's now, and this is technology, and pivoting into your technology question, this is where how can we start using technology to ready ourselves for the inevitable disruption as it will come. You can't enjoy that level of gross margin at every level of the supply chain, from manufacturer, distributor, clinic, etc. There's going to be consolidation. So EMA Aesthetics' position is, well, let's position ourselves today knowing that consolidation will come. We have a very clear view how we think it will come, that therefore when this consolidation happens, we are able to reap the benefits of that margin, preserve our own margin, of course, but if there's any other margin available from other areas, that we can also benefit from that.
Great. We're going to be taking some questions from the audience later. So I invite everybody to start posing questions. We have a doctor actually in the audience today, but I believe he's not the medical doctor, Dr. Manmohan. And he's asked us one question, which we've already answered. And the other question is your idea about building and structuring organizations. Before I jump into talking a little bit more about EMA, now that you've seen the corporate world and you're seeing a more tech-oriented startup, how do you see organizations and their structuring?
For me, it's you have to have a solid base. You absolutely need to have a solid base. Otherwise, you're just going to run into continual growing pains and your problems become harder and harder. So I'll give a tangible example. We launched a new product a couple of years ago, and under advisement from shareholders, seed shareholders, they said, go big, go large. And we went out into multiple territories this. And then, of course, we discovered there were some issues, not with the product per se, but with the go-to-market plan. And then we had to rectify that in multiple territories. And we didn't have the infrastructure. And it was a very painful process to learn from. So that was the first thing. So having that solid base is critical. So we're launching a new product actually the next quarter. And there we've been very selective. We're launching in 2 target markets specifically, making sure the right infrastructure is in place to support that, so that we learn from that, knowing that we're going slower. That's, people would argue you're going too slow, but going slower, that we know that when we go into North America, we go into mainland Western Europe, that we've learned from those 2 trial markets. So for me, you've got to have the right size of structure. You've got to have the right corporate structure to do that, to support what you want to do. Yes, of course, you can push the envelope because you want to maximize revenue, but be able to support it. And then, of course, it depends on the industry. And some industries will be more forgiving of mistakes or more forgiving of lack of customer service per se than others. But it's that right sizing. But if you don't start with the right core, the right base, it's very difficult if you're going through high levels of growth to retrospectively go back and fix it.
Absolutely. So build it as if it was a huge company, and this way you don't stumble along the way. Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about EMA and the future of aesthetics. But so we understand now the rationale behind going into the industry, beyond creating a company, but I want to understand a little bit the value proposition. Taking from your Uber example, maybe to simplify my question as well by leading you there. Uber solved a problem that we all had, which is the taxi ride. And it looked at each and every pain element of that taxi ride, calling the cab driver or notifying them where I am, where I want to be, and later on dealing also with the payment with practically 1 or 2 clicks. And that's their value proposition at the end of the day. That's why we now all use ride apps, whether Uber or others. What is the similar thought process that you put behind defining the EMA Aesthetics value proposition? What is the pain that you're solving and how?
So our tagline of EMA Aesthetics is many beautiful returns. And many beautiful returns has two meanings. Beautiful because we're the industry of aesthetics, and that's actually giving the patient a result that they're happy with, their skin quality, how their eyebrows look, all of the above. I.e., if a patient comes, has a treatment, that they go home and they feel happy with the treatment, and therefore they will return for a follow-up or they return for another procedure. That's a beautiful return. The second thing, of course, is if they do that, then the practitioner, the doctor, the clinician, the esthetician will see a financial return, a return on their investment and on a device or a product range, and so they get a financial return. So patient returns mean financial returns, and so therefore we have the cycle of many beautiful returns. Our view when we looked at the industry was that it was commoditized, as I said, moving of boxes, of moving the highest margin items to patients, which may or may not be the best treatment for the patient. But our view is, let's provide products and services which give great levels of efficacy, which lead to patient returns, but also give great financial returns for those practitioners using the product. And the idea is to put a moat around the practitioner, that awful expression we use in the financial world, a moat around the practitioner, because they are the gatekeeper to the patients, so the gatekeeper to the treatments. And how do you do that? Well, we looked at the industry and said, today, a field sales rep for a distributor will go into a doctor and say, dear doctor, here is the latest, let's use iPhone. Here's the latest iPhone. It's the iPhone 12. It has a bigger screen than the last model. It has a longer battery life, and it has a better camera. But buy the iPhone, it's $1,000. And the doctor will be convinced and say, well, yes, my patients talk about the iPhone. That's great. I'll buy it. And they'll pay $1,000 for the iPhone. The very next day, a patient walks in and says, I've heard the Samsung Galaxy is a really, really good phone. Do you have it in clinic? And he'll say, well, no, I've just bought the iPhone and it's really, really good. Now the patient wants Galaxy, but he's got iPhone and he's had to spend his CapEx on the iPhone. And that's where he's lost. That's where he's lost. If he's very lucky, the patient walks in and says, I want the iPhone. They have the treatment with the iPhone. It's amazing. And they tell all their friends, and he's inundated with people wanting iPhone treatments. So as EMA Aesthetics, our view is, how can we ensure that the doctor is having the right product, at, of course, the right price, the right level of ROI, with the right levels of support in terms of training, more importantly, efficacy, product development support later, that when he buys the product or uses the product, he knows that he's safe, he's looked after. He's not just, it's not a sell, you know, of hello, here's my product and buy and walk away. And that is a very different position. Every brand out there will sell training. Every brand out there will sell products, but ultimately they'll be back the following year with the latest version, the iPhone 13, the iPhone 14. So what are we doing differently in the industry to make sure that once they bought the iPhone from us, that they're happy continuing to have that, they've got the support, it's always going to return them revenue from that, and the patients are there. And it's developing that business model to its fullest, but always based on that patient efficacy. That patient was really happy with the results and is going to come back.
Having the patient, like Uber did, having the user at the center of this experience. But a note on iPhone and Apple, because I'm a big fan as well, sometimes foolishly. So, but in fact, it is the only one, company that perhaps in the mobile space did not really focus on biggest screen, finest, finest, what do you call it, definition or anything. In fact, what I love about iPhone is the value proposition that Apple chose at the time was simple, beautiful, and you will like this one, and magical to use. So they went in a space where nobody could compete with them. Taking another question, we have Ashish on the line, fellow board member and current president of TiE Dubai, and he has a very important question to you in this business unusual world. Now that more and more we are at home, people maybe don't go so much to these clinics. And probably you had to deal with this for a year also, or a few months of the past year in an extreme case. What is your plan to going where the patient is?
It's a good question. All of the products that we have are professional use only. So they require a practitioner to deliver the treatment, whether it be a device or whether it be the range of cosmeceuticals that we have. Of course, we have a home care range that the patient will buy, take from the clinician back to their home to continue their treatment. But actually looking at it slightly differently, when we would go back to the first lockdown we experienced last year, so March pretty much through to the end of May, beginning of June, we saw the same issue everybody else had. The clinics were closed, people weren't going for treatments. But very interestingly, and this is why the industry is growing at an average of 10% CAGR, the moment lockdown ended, the clinics were full, absolutely full. So we effectively suffered 4.5 months of almost zero revenue, because if there's no treatments, there's no purchasing. But June to December, we saw an almost doubling of our run rate, where the patient demand was so great, the clinics and the distributors were wanting to buy stocks because the demand for procedures were there. And even the first quarter of this year, where Europe remains in lockdown, Asia remains in lockdown, really only the Middle East that it remains relatively open, we've seen, again, a doubling of demand for product. So, if the world were to continue in lockdown forever, and we hope it doesn't, I mean, various governments have taken various approaches, the vaccination route, etc., is that the assumption is that in-clinic treatment will continue. I suppose where the medical aesthetics world is fortunate, being a clinic, it already is a clean environment. They're used to the safety protocols, etc. So, a clinic is able to open with the right protocols, which were already in place, versus a hairdressing salon or an office who've had to create the protocols that are in place. But the demand clearly from the consumer for a Botox injection, a filler injection, a facial, these procedures is apparently insatiable. I mean, as I said, we're at $11.5 billion today, growing to just under 19 billion 4 years from now, and that included a rebasing for the situation with COVID.
That's interesting. So from the question also that Ashish raised, would you consider or do you see a trend of some mobility in that setup in terms of, fancy vans or trucks that go into places and where you can have these procedures with people, or is it very, very fixed and brick and mortar kind of setup?
I wouldn't say it's brick and mortar. I'd say where the trend in the industry is very much moving towards practitioner. So let's take art as an example. If you wanted to paint a beautiful mural on your wall at home, and all the artists were still alive, would you invite Monet, Picasso, and Renoir to all work on the mural together? The answer is no, because you'd end up with a mess. You choose one practitioner. You particularly like the art of Picasso. You'd say, Picasso, can you please do the mural? It's the same thing with your face. It's the same thing with your body. You go to a practitioner and say, I don't like this about my face. Can you help me with my Botox, my fillers? What do you recommend? And so the artist is at work applying all the relevant technologies to give you the look that you want, right? Now, if that practitioner has a mobile clinic, that there's a top-up procedure that doesn't require his or her expertise, that's potential. But actually what you tend to see in the industry today is that people like to go for their treatments because they like the end result. They like walking out feeling better about themselves. And this level of empowerment, and this is probably one of the main drivers in the industry, is that it's no longer an excuse not to look good. You don't have to be cut to have a facelift. Yeah? You don't have to go through weeks of downtime and thousands and thousands of dollars of cost to look better. You can do that, of course, eating healthily, exercise, but now a few very simple aesthetic procedures, you can take years off. We've been dyeing our hair for years. Right, but now you can disguise and help your skin look its natural best just with a few simple procedures.
I wear a hat, but for the hair part. But the question then in this kind of also very digital future that we're seeing, we have other sessions where we talk to people from the tech industry, and we discuss the virtual world, augmented reality and virtual reality, and the possibilities that we can have with a nice Instagram filter. Even Zoom and other teleconferencing systems have filters anymore. Do we really need to go anywhere? Can't we just rely on that magic of the screen and maybe hide behind a digital avatar and look at our best? You can be anybody on the web, right?
You can be anybody on the web, but when you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see?
Absolutely. Very good answer. And I love actually also the analogy between artists, because makeup artist is probably the only title outside of the art world where you have the word artist in it. So that gets us into a nice mode. But mixing art with technology, what kind of technologies do you see entering into the aesthetics world and disrupting it? And maybe we talk a little bit about Emma. Who is she?
We can talk about Emma, absolutely. But technology. So without revealing too much, because of course, we believe that we're market leaders in this space at the moment of what we're trying to do. All I'll say is that in the industry, in this $11.5 billion industry, there is very little, if hardly none, of data. There's no data. Now, of course, we have to be very careful in this world because patient data is sacrosanct, right? So a patient's data and what they've had done, etc. But there is no data, there's no use of data about what procedures are done, how they're done, how a device is used, what a technician has done. All these things isn't there. And we think that's wrong. We think that there's a huge opportunity for big data in this space. And we may just have developed our latest generation device, which is fully IoT enabled. We just may have done that. I can neither confirm nor deny. And we may or may not have developed a complete portal to allow all that data to be stored. We may or may not have systemized the medical regulation part of the business to allow the transfer of a device or products into the supply chain, right down to consumer, to systemize that whole process. We may or may not have done that, but it certainly is something that if it hasn't been done, should be done.
Very good. Interesting. Excellent. Let's see. Do we have any other questions from the audience before we move on? Now is your chance. I'll talk a little bit more about Emma in the meantime. So why Emma? Who is she? What's the name about? And wait for 3 more questions before concluding.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So Emma in her long name is Emerging Medical Aesthetics for obvious reasons. But we decided the world of aesthetics is so personal and it involves treatments and it involves an individual that Emma should have a personality. So rather than EMA, we decided to call her Emma to give her a personality. And she does have a personality. We have our view of our why we exist. And ultimately, we say that we believe that life is an art, and everything that we do embraces that art. And what I mean by that is that what may be natural to me and what makes me happy and content and feel fulfilled may be ultimately very different from you, Ziad, what makes you feel happy, fulfilled, and content. And it's exactly the same thing in the world of aesthetics. Some people may embrace the idea of looking younger, having better skin tone, having less fine lines, etc., etc. Others may not be that. And what we're saying is that we don't dictate to anybody the art of living, but we understand it, and we certainly help in the area of medical aesthetics for you, if you wish to take that path, to have a very fulfilling result with efficacy. So that's the personality of Emma.
Interesting. So if Emma was an artist, who would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't really have an answer to that. I'm sure that any of the patients who've used our devices or used our products would have an idea. But what we try and do is that we regard ourselves as the paints, the brushes, the various the crayons, all that part. And actually, the artist is the esthetician. The artist is the doctor. The artist is the clinician who's using our paints and using our products, the clay, whatever, to make the art form on the patient's face.
Very good, very good. One more question from the audience. Going back, maybe taking us away from Emma and back into your DMCC days, what is the proudest achievement you can name from that time?
Oh, I think my proud. There are many. I have too many. But I think it was a moment when, in our first year, the first year that we were there, where we were facing a significant challenge. You know, Dubai was facing a significant financial challenge, and I'd inherited a very sick organization, a very sick company financially. And putting forward my first 100 days as CEO, putting forward the plan for the year with the three objectives. And the three objectives were that we were going to be cash flow break even, we would have zero debt, and the third one, we'd turn a profit. And the board laughing at us, laughing at the management team, saying, you're joking. There's no way that you can take the business from where it is today in 1 year and deliver those three things. And I said, okay, that's fine, the challenge accepted. If we do deliver these three things, I would like to have the ability to pay bonuses to the team, the staff, because as a Dubai government entity, there'd been no bonus payments for many years. There was a royal decree that was issued because of the financial crisis. And the board said, yes, of course, Malcolm, if you deliver those three things, you, of course, can pay the staff bonuses. I wasn't included in that, but that's fine. And it was delivering all those three things. We were a cash flow break even, we were debt free, and we delivered a profit. And it was the ability to pay staff bonuses because they had all worked extremely hard in delivering what was probably one of the momentous turnarounds in Dubai's history.
Congratulations and a warm round of applause from the whole audience for that achievement.
Thank
you. Thanks a lot again for joining us today. We talked about many things. We talked about how boredom gets you out of the comfort zone, but also how execution happens by surrounding yourself with bright people who can then execute while you empower them and helping them make the decisions. Also, I noted, and for the benefit of our audience, your criteria for approaching new industries or new sectors: so large, growing, profitable, fragmented, commoditized, and complacent. You should try to find a nice acronym for that because it doesn't work. I tried. So this is for the audience. We'll probably put them on the social media. And for those of you who didn't get the chance to ask us questions, please do so via our social media channels, via TiE Dubai and our personal channels. Malcolm, to be honest, as you said, it's not the art of living; it's the art of living beautifully. And for 49 years old, you're doing it very well. So well done. Many
Thank you.
Beautiful returns, as you said, and look forward to catching you again in 10 years when you are not an entrepreneur anymore and enjoying the fruits of this business. Thanks a lot again for joining us. Before we leave, we have a nice poll for the audience to give us their feedback. Hope you enjoyed this session and found it valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any last advice while we're getting the answers to the poll?
Any last advice? I tend not to give advice. In YPO, they're very clear about not giving advice. We can only give shared experiences. I think the only shared experience I'd give it being an entrepreneur and what I'm doing now is that it never gets easier. Every finish line is a new start line, and you just have to keep on marching. That's all you can do.
Agreed. Thanks again, Malcolm. Thank you very much. Thanks to our audience.
Pleasure.
And see you next week for the launch of the TiE Women Competition. Bye-bye.